Now on the last tape we had done, joined the wing, installed the tips, put the bell crank in on the A26 wing, among other projects. Wes had done some work on his foam. He's got his stuff up to the point where we're pretty much ready to glass and join the wings. We had made some scale parts for the B25, but unfortunately we weren't paying attention to coming up on the end of the tape, and we were in the middle of making elevators for the A26 when we ran out of tape. So my apologies, but we're going to continue making the elevators on this tape. We were just setting up to install the ribs. We had cut out the ribs, made the little jig to make the elevators, and the next step on this is going to be to make up a prototype elevator and install the ribs. I cut up enough ribs for one elevator. I'm going to just push them down on a flat surface. Put one of my pins from each side. The reason for this is I just want to dress them off and make sure they're all, by holding them together like this. I gotta move this pin, it's too thin down here. What this allows me to do is get the ribs all exactly even. And if you really want it to be fanatical, of course, you could make a little plywood template for each side, but I think this will make it accurate enough. We're working off the back, we're going to cut the front, so what we really need more than anything else is to have the back exactly right. Now that gives us, once we take the pins out, a real nice set of real accurate ribs. Now we can just glue them in one at a time. So what I did, I took, the next step is get the top skin on. I just put a little piece of 3/8 on there so it would hold the skin down flat while the alphatic dries. Ended off the top edge, just cleaned the edge of the ribs off, capped it off with a piece of 1/16. Again, we're trying to keep this as light as possible, and just get this sanded relatively flat with a block, so we have a nice true edge to start with. So what I'm trying to do is use the sanding block itself to keep the surface perfectly flat while I'm sanding it. Don't have to overdo it. The idea is to keep the trailing edges straight as possible until we lock it in with the leading edge. One thing I wanted to try, I had this piece of leading edge stock that we made up on a previous video. I just glued two pieces at relatively 90 degrees. And what I wanted to do is see if I could just put a little bit of an angle in here. Then I can basically get this on center line. So the first thing I'll need to do is draw a center line on this. If it doesn't work out, I trimmed this. So if this doesn't work out the way I want it to, I have a very easy choice. I can just cut it right off and put it on a piece of 3/8. I need to just line up the point exactly. Okay, now I need to put in little blocks where the hinge pockets are going to be. I can just take some pieces of scrap, soft scrap, and put them on the inside, the 3 blocks where the hinge pockets will be. Again, we're trying to make this, every part, a little bit lighter than the parts that we used on the B25. And so far, we've been very successful in doing that. See, in other words, I can just manipulate this around until I'm right on center. I need to mark which side is the inner side, which side is the outside. And basically, let's put in a block in here, and this will be relatively easy. Again, I want to give myself a little room for when I actually do make the hinge pockets. Really, really punk wood here. This is probably 3-pound wood. This will be perfect for making these. If I can just take off a piece, use some kind of a triangle piece to go right in there. Oh boy, this wood is like, absolutely like butter. You almost could, and the stripper can just get some triangle stock off of here. Now I put the little pieces in. This will be where we actually make the 3 hinge pockets. And that's all the material we need to reinforce by the hinges. And I think we've gotten probably 30 or 40% of the weight of that part out, as opposed to a solid piece, having a hollow piece like that. Beveled this off at 45 with a sanding block. Made sure I have these dimensions for both sides. Now I need to cut out the little rib ends that are opposite where the hinge pockets are, so that can sit right in. You see where the interference, the ribs that are sticking out by hinge pockets, I just trim them even. Now, to avoid the surfaces puffing up any more than necessary, I'm going to put at least 1 or 2 holes in every rib. The idea of that is so we don't have, when it's out in the sun, we don't have that look of it's puffed up. With a couple of pieces of tape on here, I can get the center line exactly lined up. And once I have it exactly lined up, I can just tack glue that on, make sure both sides are the same. And once the tape is holding it in place, I can put a little pressure here. That may seem like this is a lot of extra work, but once a plane is done, and in this case the B25 is done, and you want to go back and get out an ounce, it's a lot easier to get it out right now. Make sure we haven't put a twist in this. I think this makes a nice little weight saving, and there's certainly no stress in this part other than just holding hinges in. Once we get this tack glued in place, pull the tape off, trim and sand this all down, and we will have one elevator. Make sure it's staying nice and straight. Now once I can seat it, everything is perfectly straight. I haven't somehow put a twist into it in any way. Now the last step is just going to be to run a thin glue seam right down the back, and then carefully, and I mean carefully, block sand this. And I like to always support it if possible when I'm block sanding it. The bird just took a bath and flew by me. I thought it was raining in here. Chickie! You're going to live with Ken Claxon if you don't behave. As soon as that kicks off, we get this block sanded out, and that probably will be all we're going to get to do tonight. But even getting one made, just that much nicer to be one step ahead. get some of this material off. Of course, there's a hard area of CA in there. I don't want to go past that. Anyway, we put quite a bit of effort into making these elevators as light and straight as possible. But once again, once the model's built, it's not difficult, it's impossible to go back and do some of these things. I'm just wondering if I can knock some of this down this way. See, what I always would like to do, if I had the choice, is while it's being sanded, sand it with a flat support underneath it. These sanding blocks that Les bought, boy, if you ever want to get a set of tools that's just worth its weight in gold. Wow. And again, we'll finish up the night by just getting a final sanding on this. And probably tomorrow, we'll be ready to make a mirror image of this part for the other side. That part sanded out really nice. Then when we come back to the shop tomorrow, we'll make a matching twin to it. Oh, in today's mail from Ken Nash. Ken was one of the pull testers at this year's Nats, and we gave him a hard time a couple of times. He's had an excellent sense of humor, and he's real happy. Now follow how this worked out. He built a Brodak Cardinal, a profile, and he said, I'm reading right from his letter, it flew right off the board. Well, that's amazing, and I'm happy for you, Ken. But this is what I really like. Now look at it real close. This is from Elliott Scott's plans. It's a Cardinal Evolution. Doesn't say what kind of finish, but I'm sure it's a Brodak dope finish. Looks real nice. I like how he did the lettering. But you know that song, that James Bond song, Diamonds Are Forever? I think this is perfect. Diamonds Are Forever. He should have named this plane Diamonds Are Forever. Anyway, he says he loves his Cardinal. Looks like he really does like this Cardinal. Do you like this Cardinal, Ken? We haven't seen him in a long time. Hey, he likes his Cardinals. Ken, appreciate the pictures. That's really great. I think this Cardinal needs a girlfriend, don't you? You can tell I've been working on this in A26 too long. Yeah, we love you too, Chickadilly. Anyway, really nice Cardinal. Hard not to like that. Cardinals, Diamonds Are Forever. Ken, you need a nice carbon fiber gear on there. Lighten it up. Well, it's the time of the year we have the pond closed up, and we look up every morning at the little, this tree has almost no leaves at all. Try to determine if it's going to be a decent day to get a few flights in. Brian usually has Tuesday off, and Keith Ferguson is supposed to join us up at the field. So if we get a couple flights, it'll be just free money. Whoa, look who's up in the tree. Whoa. Anyway, it looks a little breezy, but you never can tell. The breeze over here and the breeze up in Palisade Park is two different things. Now we'll see what we have for today. The flag, it doesn't look real promising, but no. A lot of times you just have to give it a shot. Now, this looks like one of the days it could rain, it could get cranky, it could get lousy, we could get inundated by geese. I'm not sure. And it might clear up, who knows. This time of year, everything's a surprise.
What I did was
we leave the house. This is called Brian and I leave. It's stun heaven. Keith leaves. It's stun heaven. We get here and the wind is howling. Oh,
put
man.
the other motor back. I think the other motor ran back.
What motor's in there now? The Fox?
Yeah, but I had two of them. And one I ran at the contest.
Okay. Well, you were getting lean runs at the contest.
And this one doesn't do that.
Okay. This a rework one or a?
No. Well, you know, Brodak. You know, the backing plate and the...
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Every day that we're here, this tree gets further and further down. It looks like it's just, it has definitely taken its toll. Anyway, the objective is we're going to try to get a couple of Keith's flights on video so we can use them as coaching tools. We were trying to help Keith at the Circle Burner contest. He's got a different motor in here than the motor he had at the Circle Burner contest, and an ounce of nose weight, so we'll see if any of that matters or if any of that makes a difference. Now, we got one thing here we do, Keith. Yeah. Very important. If you hear the word birds, 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 fly low.
Fly level.
Because they'll come out over the river. We've had some funny...
It's like Apocalypse Now with the
Apocalypse Now with the helicopters. You can hear the noise, yes.
So they just come out and
They're Canada geese, and they, for some reason, think they're Americans. I'm not sure. I don't see any now, but we got seagulls all over the place here. And they like the sound of the engine. Well, Mikey almost whacked one Saturday when he was flying Miss Ashley. We were doing some stuff with little tail bushings, and Mikey took 2 or 3 flights, and then when he almost hit the bird, he wouldn't fly anymore. He said, "No, that's it. Your turn to fly." Yeah, it's a shame because now that Keith has now that he's retired and has some extra time, it looks like he's retired at exactly the wrong time of the year when we're starting to lose the air every day. But we'll try to get some, well, what we're looking for here is some information and some feedback, or in this case, here's a significant thing. You can see, Keith can see if he likes the nose weight better, or if he prefers this motor. He's got 2 of them. If he likes this motor better than the other one. But you can see the flag in the background. It's just typical, I guess, of this time of year. We have this seagull thing going on here with these Canada geese. And they really, there's been a couple of days that like a herd of 1,000 of them just flies in, and it's like an Alfred Hitchcock movie here. But it's still better to have a field, and boy, we love this field. Even if we have to share it with the birds. Now it's funny, this time of year, you can get some beautiful days, and right in the middle of last Tuesday, Brian and I had a day that just, you couldn't believe how nice it was. And then the day of the contest, it was beautiful, and then now a day that it looks real nice, and yet it goes downhill so fast. But even a bad day, we'll get something, we'll learn something, and Keith will get some experience, get used to the background here, and get used to ducking birds. Now, one of the things Keith had a problem with at the Circle Burner field, we had a couple lean runs. We got a couple, maybe 3 flights on video. I had put some little comments on them. I'm just going to look at one flight before we do anything. Kind of a warm-up flight because he's made a trim change. So here go the birds. Check this out. And they fly right over the flying field, so you got to watch this stuff. Look at these guys. Can be a problem. Anyway, now that Keith has this time available, I hope he's going to be spending some time at the shop. He's got an Impact almost finished. Or part finished, I'm not sure. There he is. Bumpity boom bum bum. Boom for the boom. And I was trying to explain to Keith that when I retired from Ford, the first thing I did was go flying every day. Rain, snow, bad weather, good weather, yeah, it's gonna be almost pointless. But then I started getting a little more, I said, hey, I can fly whenever I want. Why am I flying every day? Just fly when it's fun. We're not practicing for a big contest, or we're not, and even if we were, who cares? So I guess the biggest thing we can get out of today is if Keith is going to be happy with this motor instead of the other one, and we'll find out after the day is over. I think he's got the hinge lines taped, and if he likes the nose weight in or the nose weight out, he's got lead in the back plate. And my suggestion is whenever you put lead in the back plate, and that was old technology from the old days, put a little cover of tin over the back just in case it loosens up in time. It doesn't wind up either breaking through the cowling or, in the worst case, flying out and hitting your best friend in the head. At the end of this week, we're leaving on our vacation to go to Phoenix, so we're going to kind of be gone into some real hot weather. We've heard it's over 100 degrees out there. Karen's relatives, we're not going out for an airplane thing. Karen's relatives are the people we're going to visit. See, what I was really hoping to accomplish was to tripod up some flights, and yeah, it has to be reasonably good, because you want to be able to define what was a problem because of the wind or a problem, and in this much wind, you're just surviving. It's kind of it's like that gnat, and you don't want to have you don't want to lose a plane, that's for sure. Now this plane, my opinion is, just by looking at it, it's certainly, even with the nose weight, it doesn't look like it's hurting for a turn. That nose weight doesn't seem to be hurting anything. And we'll see how Keith feels about it. One of the things we had a little conversation about it, Keith has another Cavalier kit at home, and this is my feeling too. Even a small plane like this, on windy conditions like this, hurricane conditions, whatever, these are actually Muncie conditions, it always benefits by having stiffer controls. So if he builds the new Cavalier and puts in a set of 1/8" bulletproof horns and a 4" belt crank, I just think in good air, nothing bad happens, but in a terrible day, a day like today where it's really bumpy, it's just, well, it gets a lot better. Now we checked this plane definitely, because Keith didn't build this plane. This plane has 332nd horns, and under really high load conditions, they tend to get flexible. Which is the reason most people, well, sounds like I'm advertising, but It's why years ago when people argued with me, you don't need 1/8" horns, and now you go to the Nats and pretty much everybody has them.
So I switched engines.
It's something worth considering, and I think because he's already got one half built, it's an excellent choice. Just upgrade the control system, and you'd be far ahead of the game. And he likes this engine package. He's got 2 of these.
No, that was the one that was going lean.
And like I said, he's got an Impact too, but I would lay off on the Impact, and I would finish another copy of this over the winter with 1/8" horns, and I think that'd be a much better choice for an advanced level flyer to learn on. Prime bottle, we gotta look around and make sure there's no feds around. He's doing steroids in the parking lot. Oh man.
Bring out the neoprene tubing.
Yeah, get the tubing, yeah. What's in that toolbox, boy? I want the cops to be here. Oh no! He's using drugs in the park in the flying field, Mr. Bill. This is an amazing thing to get in there, Keith. I can't believe who engineered this up?
What's that?
That you can't show. There's no way my finger'd go in there. Is that Simpson who invented that or Tom Morris?
Syringe thing?
No, that you can't get in there. I gotta look at Lampions, how he gets in there.
That's the way it comes. You want to look.
Yeah, you gotta pay. If you want to be Billy Wurwitz, you gotta pay, baby. Cobra, Steve Woolley. And funny how in the middle of the winter, those cowlings look so cute, and then the first day of spring, you say, whose idea was this? They're circling. They know Keith is getting ready to start his engine. Oh, these birds. Actually, it's getting nastier by the minute. We may be having a storm come in here. It blew the sign down. Anyway, Keith is getting something accomplished here. I think we're going to get one more flight and then head up to the diner. This is a great day to have a hot cup of soup or something for lunch, or even if you're not hungry, it's good. It seems like the wind's even getting worse. Look at that flag up there now. Anyway, I'd be willing to bet this is going to be the last flight of the day. It's going to be coffee time. But a day like today, one thing it confirms in my mind is just how important it is, even on a small plane, even on a Fox 35 plane, having, oh, there go the birds. Look at this. You don't know where the hell they're going either. Boy, they go wild. Yes, they don't like Fox 35s. They don't like Coon pipes, and boy, they hate the B-25. I know that. Confirmed in my mind many times how, just repeat this story. Another thing that Keith has in this plane, they're very sensitive controls. He's got the handle, it's a CAS handle that's as closed as you can make it, and it still looks like it's on the sensitive side. Like Keith said, John Simpson has, yeah, it's really getting dusty. John Simpson has a special little small handle, and John Simpson's probably got smaller hands because he's a smaller person, so he can shrink that ratio down even more. Or maybe he uses a handle with a bar that he can get it way down. But we had a plane, the 900, just to remember a story, Lou Dudka had cut the wing, a 900 sweeper, and he insisted that we put these 332nd horns in basically because he already had them. And I said, I was thinking 1/8" horns, and he says, no. And like a fool, I put them in and went out through the plane, probably the better part of a year, and when it got windy like this, the plane was not happy. And I had to cut the whole plane apart like rehabbing an old house. Ooh, easy Keith. And when I put the 1/8" horns in, even Lou Dudka said, definitely. And from that point on, all of the guys in the circle burners, all of us put 1/8" horns in all of the big planes. It was just as simple as that. But the Little Red Noble had 1/8" horns. The original Brodak Cardinal had them. And certainly if you're building a Strega kit, you want the upgrade if you're going to fly in a wing. If you're not going to fly in a wing, it won't be that critical. But in a wing, day like today, could be significant. Anyway, I'm thinking, assuming Keith finishes this flight, I'm thinking maybe it's going to be time to head out to the diner. Cut our losses here. Well, at least we went.
I'm Rich. My wife.
He doesn't feel well, so you
My wife Susan.
you have to kind of work around.
Son heaven, huh? We're out there dying thanks to you. I could have stayed home and worked with Les. So he lied to me.
When you
He said it was
called,
stun heaven.
He must have told you that.
Brian, did he lie to you or what? Look at what he's got going
When
on.
I went outside, I said, this guy's nuts.
He lied. Keith, he lied to us.
Blowing through here.
Smokey, I want to give him the fifth. Get the Kobe Bryant jury.
He doesn't feel
I gotta bring him to the doctor.
Smokey's not well?
Blood count is,
Yeah.
Well, he's diabetic, right?
yeah. I gave him shots.
He doesn't even want to get up. Come on.
I'm ready now to,
You ready to put the silver on? Doesn't look like you did anything.
What do you mean? No, since you saw it last night.
Did you fix the push rod like I told you?
No, I did not. I believe it's strong enough the way it is.
Oh. Now, you know what he's got? He epoxied that adjuster in without putting a pin through it. So this may be a three-flight plane. Ask Warren Walker. Warren's came out.
What wing is this?
This is a Cardinal wing.
Those are the Bill Biles adjusters, and they work well, but I just
So,
want to have something more than where they glue in.
Oh, it's a
I don't know, whiskey.
Yeah.
And our good friend Warren Walker, he lost his plane because
you never saw
one of
it,
that thing,
obviously.
something like that came apart anyway.
Yeah, here's the cowl.
You know what's a good thing to do, Rich? Hey, Rich,
Yes.
as soon as you can, you should bring this over so we can crimp the lead out.
Oh, yeah, I will.
You know why? Because if these fall into the wing, you got to cut a hole.
Oh, I locked them in. Oh, I know. I've been there.
You've been there and done that,
Oh,
huh?
I know that. No, I tightened up the,
Mike's fell into the
I
wing.
know. Yours did too, didn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And mine did too.
Yeah, I know. We all been down that road.
So I locked them.
Oh.
I locked them.
This is,
Tightened
you
up.
redesigned this? Didn't it fit over? I remember the old advertisement, it looked like it slid over the,
No, it goes.
I'll show you one by the house.
Inside the
But he
push rod.
glued it, but when you glue it, Bri, even if you put a tiny hole and put
Right.
safety wire,
I've done that with,
but have nothing, when that glue lets go,
Well, I don't have a drill.
a tiny drill,
That's small enough to
I have it by the house.
Well, I'll
Just bring
come
it
over to the
over.
house and you can drill.
If I have to, I'll get Les. Les has a whole set of those drills.
But do you have a high-speed tool that will?
Absolutely.
Is your Dremel fast enough?
Sure.
Because I don't think they're fast
Sure.
enough when you're revolving a real small diameter drill.
Trust me.
Okay.
Trust
How about you do it?
We'll put, say, Danny Bandrock gave me a roll of safety wire. Even if you just put safety wire through,
That's, no, that's enough.
yeah, all you need is a fine,
Just a little hole, and then you put
exactly.
Yeah, then you put
Tiny
a little,
hole.
put a little epoxy in it.
Shove it with
You know?
epoxy and then tighten it up.
Yeah, here's the.
I would
haven't done
wanna do
anything
that.
Since you saw it last, Wendy.
He said that.
I said that, yeah.
That was his first
this
word.
wasn't in
You
silver,
haven't
right?
done anything.
Well, you know what?
All my subscribers want to see how much ambition this man has.
No, because
None.
actually, the weather hasn't been really.
Oh no, you painted the manifolds. He did do one thing.
Wait a minute, the weather was great yesterday.
He's in a, hey, Keith, look, he's got little hypodermic needles. Maybe you could get
Yeah, I
those.
know.
Another drug
I
addict.
know, he's ready for Fox 35.
My cat. But I use these to hold
That's
the manifold.
perfect.
What do you think?
You know?
Yeah, they're fine.
You wouldn't normally
look good,
prime
huh?
it with
Yeah.
that one.
Now paint them black from the inside with
yeah.
talcum powder in the black, so it
Right.
looks like soot.
And then I'm going to.
Right.
Yeah.
So that they're done. Everything is done.
Just look at them as priming
Yeah.
syringes.
That's all. And the only thing that needs to be done, as I said, I have to put it in silver.
He's got a nice cockpit on here. I've seen the cockpit, Keith. When he built this plane, Joe Adamusco was here, and he was going to put a wood block.
No, I wasn't going
And
to put
Joe
a
Adamusco
I was gonna go ahead
humiliated
and
him.
Tinted. I was going to go ahead and tint the
No. Now he's changing his story.
What was happening, you
guys
see,
wanna
you put
wash up this
2
bathroom?
two
Now we're going to go to the diner.
of weight
Whatever.
with all
Richard owes us coffee.
with all the
He
details.
invited us up for lunch at his expense.
So I wanted to save the two
He
and a
just
half.
put it on a
ounces
business
weight.
card,
Yeah.
his American Express.
And as a result, I thought maybe the way to do it would be to just tint the
We
canopy.
do something else while you guys are
But
talking.
Joe, that'd have to be.
Boy, Joe got on him like a wet blanket.
Semi-scale
Right.
plane, you gotta have. Okay,
Yeah.
so I went hog wild. I got a radio in there, I got an antenna, I got all kinds of junk.
Yeah, he-
German newspapers
Yeah, he-
from World War II.
yeah, he gave you the message right
Yes.
from the homeland.
So what,
No go.
The fatherland.
Yeah, no go.
well, the problem is, I got 2.5 ounces of weight.
Yeah, you can't bomb. You can't bomb with tinted.
Yeah, most of the levels will mark.
This'll be a great plane. What do you
I
think?
think so, I hope so, anyhow.
So what do you, so it's tissue the body?
Yeah, it's ready for silver, but
All ready for
Yeah, it's a
silver.
nice tissue.
he's just a little lighter.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it has, but you know,
I know, but
Keith, eighth inch.
oh yeah, yeah, the
Yeah,
real
those are your horns.
No, it doesn't matter who made it. Eighth inch is eighth inch.
No, those are the ones that I buy from you, you know?
But no,
Now, is this basically a cardinal?
It's basically a cardinal.
I mean, with the
The moments are a cardinal, everything's a cardinal. The only thing I jazzed up was the wing
the
tips
chase body
and the body shape, the configuration. I only build cardinals, you know, because he knows. My cardinals, I turn them into Stragers, you know, P51 months.
Well, even though the weather was terrible, I think Keith learned some important little things about how to upgrade his program. Now, this has been drying overnight, needless to say. It's going to be very easy from this point. I'm going to pillow foil with tape, take this outside where the wind is blowing and let it blow the dust away. Pretty much from this point on, this wing will get either 320 or 400. And the little bit of time I have left here the rest of the day, I want to get a nice smooth finish on the whole wing so that it'll be prepped in and ready for its putting on the fiberglass. I want to go any further on this before I do any of the real detail sanding. I've done all the rough sanding. Before I get all the details done, I want to pad the table. Now, you have this real old bed pad. I really ought to buy another one. Because what happens with a bed pad or foam, if you happen to drop a couple of drops of thin CA on it, it makes little rough spots and it chews up the finish. And at this point in time, we want to keep the finish as nice as possible on this. I don't want the finish getting dinged up any more than it has to, if it has to at all. So I want to clear off the table, get out my bed pad, and then I'll be able to sand comfortably the final little details of this sanding. Now this will do until I get a new one. This is just, well, not the best one in the world, but it's the only one I have right now. And I remember what happened. The reason I don't have a new one, because we had a new one last year, and I loaned it to somebody who hasn't returned it yet. So I'm going to have to go out and buy a new one. This'll help, but these are available in, they're about $8-10 in any of the Kmart kind of stores. And what happens, this gives you a real nice little pad to work off. Once the model is sanded out, final sanded, you don't want to be banging on edges and banging on corners of things. So having a nice pad to do the final sanding on is really, really worth its weight in gold. Another thing that's really important, I'll do it right now. As I'm sanding, there's a chance I'm going to lose this from sanding, lose this center line. So right where the two center lines join, I'm going to install a toothpick, a couple of drops of CA, and then I can always sand back down and find my center line. You never really lose it out at the tip, you only lose it down here. Now the idea is you only need to put the toothpick in 1/16 of an inch, just leave just that last little bit, because as you sand this off, you can always go back and see that little dot, and that little dot will reference both of the lines. We don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose any of my center lines, any of my angles. This is a great trick no matter what kind of, it wouldn't matter if it's a built-up wing. You can reference off the center line of the rib and do the same thing, but a toothpick, that's been a way that's worked for me over the years. And just obviously when it's done, cut it and sand it blunt. Good tip. This wing is ready to do the glass ellipses, fiberglassing, however you want to define it. What we're going to do is Make 3 glass ellipses on the high point of the wing, each one just a little bit smaller than the other one. All with 1/2 ounce cloth, all with West Systems resin. We're going to try to do this all in one shot if possible. Put the big ellipse down, the smaller one and the smaller one. But first thing I want to do, make up a pattern and cut up all the material. It'll all be 1/2 ounce glass, get all my things cut, and the biggest thing, and this is the step that really makes for a nice glassing job. Put a new vacuum cleaner bag in and get every bit of dust off the wing. Also, another good thing if you're going to do this, if you have compressed air, make the compressor as high as possible and just put 100 pounds of air. The more of this stuff you can get off the wing, just makes for a nicer job. And to be honest, what's real nice here is I'm getting a little bit excited because it's starting to really look like an airplane. I've been putting the wing down by the B-25 wing and holding them side by side just to get a look at how they're going to be a nice pair when they're done. Helpful is to set the wing up in such a way that it's going to be easy to work on. So I'm going to be working in the center here. And the towels, all they do is add a little stability to this. If you have a helper, of course, hey, even better, but right now we don't have one. So that gives me a little bit of a stable platform. I'm up off the foam. I'll be able to do one side. But of course, always cut the material first. Very important. That's the main thing. This is all sanded now with 400. It's really buttery, nice and smooth. But even a little bit of dust, once it gets in there and gets underneath the cloth, it's not your friend. The glass is cut, and I'll save the patterns, of course. But this is what's going to happen. We're going to put one layer, and we're working off the high point. This was Big Jim's invention years ago, and it's worked perfectly. I've never seen a plane fold a wing that had ellipses. So we're going to go with one ellipse, second ellipse right while the resin is wet, third ellipse. The reason for this is now you don't get that notch. If you did this all 1.5 ounces cloth, it'd be hard to feather this in. In our case, we're going to feather it in nicely. Then when we tissue this, the tissue will come, this panel will come over here, this one will go over here, so we'll have double tissue here. I'll also take a little Band-Aid kind of 1/2 ounce cloth and go around this. I'll cut a few small pieces, piece back there, a piece here, so that we can have a strip going right down the middle. And I'll save the patterns. So when Elliot does the plans, these will all be on the plans. Now I got the West Systems resin mixed up with the slow hardener. Make sure that's vacuum clean. Doesn't matter how much you put on at this point in time, it's irrelevant because we want the wood to soak it up, and we're going to trowel it off. Also, when you spread the resin out, you get a little extra working time as kind of a free bonus. When you think you have this resin mixed, mix it an extra 2 minutes, like all resin. Anyway, this is the lightest way I know how to glass a wing, and we did the B-25 with all the layers going out to the nacelles and everything, and I really don't think any of that was, I think it was an overkill within overkill. But we're going to certainly try to push this a little more. The idea is to get the high point of the wing. If you don't break the high point of the wing, you're not going to break the wing. I left little dots on where I cut the cloth out just so I can see where it's ending. They'll all get buried in paint, so it's not a problem. Again, I'll show half of this up on video, and then we'll do just get the bolt to come through. But right now we just want it to soak in. We're not even trying to trowel the extra off. Even though I got so much on here, I can get it off, but I want it to get good soak. Now this is a relatively hard trowel. Les just brought some of these over. This looks like it's harder than the ones you buy from John Brodak or Sig or whatever, the hobby ones, which may be an advantage in some applications, so I'll have to keep that in mind. But right now I think the softer one would do me be a lot more efficient. Now see, once I get this laid down, what I don't want to do is get all the resin off right now. I want to leave enough on here. Okay. We take ellipse number 2, which is about 3/4 of an inch smaller in all dimensions. Try to center it because we don't want it to this will pull some of the resin up. I can see I have the ellipses kind of centered. I don't want them all missing. And now the third one can go right in there. That's why those little black dots you see, they're just real helpful as far as aligning things. Now I need to get the softest trowel we have. I think that one Les has, that hard one, is not going to be the best for this last operation. No. This one is a lot softer. You can see the difference in them. This one is, well, look at the difference in the thickness, a hard one and a soft one. Soft one I think is better in this application. So I just want to go around, get as much of the resin off as I can. As soon as I finish this, then I want to put that little Band-Aid piece in. Now notice I'm going out past the end, just to feather in so that the sanding will be easier. Something nice about doing this kind of work, each time you do it, your skills just dramatically improve. You almost never do it twice, and the second one is as hard as the first one. Every one is a little bit of an improvement. Now, I need to put the Band-Aid in next. I didn't want to have them all at the same time. The Band-Aid's basically going to go right down the middle. Act as a fourth layer at the high point, which is where it's... If you can't break this high point right here, you cannot break the wing. It'll never break back there. It just isn't going to happen. So it's always good to have this. And this resin sands so nice. Once you get used to using this West system, the whole West system, it's so nice. And it has virtually no odor that even bothers Karen, so that's a big plus for me. Again, the only purpose of this Band-Aid is just to reinforce the center just a little bit more and spread the load. Again, we're going to have a bulkhead here that's going to transfer the load down the wing. Little piece in the back. I'm not sure you could even live without this. You could just forget this piece, but we'll put it in anyway. Give us something to mount our horn, and we're going to have those little brackets to hold the horn on back there. Okay, now the key thing. Scrape away. You can see each time you do it, it just more and more comes off. When we're done, we'll heat it with a little bit of heat, just a slight amount of heat. But I want to get everything in place before you use any heat. And you can see it just, you get almost all of it off. Very, very little actually stays on the model. By using a slow hardener, you give yourself a little more work time. Now, a good tip, if you're doing a straight wing that doesn't have a dihedral brake, try to do both sides, one right after another. Don't let it sit overnight. As soon as you finish one, flip it over, see underneath it's not rubbing, it's held up out on the ends. And you'll see after you put the glass and the heat on, it'll have a warp in it, and when it dries, it'll go right back to neutral. If you do both sides. Same thing with putting dope on. Put the dope on one side, do the other side right away. Now, in our case, we can just take low heat. You don't want to see bubbles. If you see bubbles, you've made it too hot. And that really lets it soak into the wood. Makes it very, very capillary. And you want to draw it out past the last layer of glass so it doesn't just end. And now I'll just do the other side of this off camera. That can dry. Basically because this sands out so easily, there's no reason to just make yourself crazy getting every little drop off. When it dries, tomorrow or the next day, this will just sand right out. And once I get the other side done, we're just going to put this aside to dry. That really was a nice job. And I'll save the templates. We hope Elliot will get those on the plans. Anybody wants to replicate this. And one of the many, many things that Big Jim has originated, taught me, and I'm trying to pass on to you. Excellent, excellent way of glassing a wing. Now I want to look at the fiberglass. I had it hang up. Usually it's a nice thing if you can let it dry even an extra day, but usually right away, and this is already going to be the next morning. You can get a rough sanding on it anyway. Now what I want to do, I want to bring it out to the padded table. Like I said, bring it out to the squash the bird. Pad the table with some towels, some blankets, some of that foam pad. I want to sand that fiberglass down now. Now usually to test, to know if the glass, the resin is totally dry, just take a little test area where the resin is. It doesn't take a lot of sanding, and we certainly don't want to sand it all off. That's the other thing. Just do one little area here. Now you look at the sandpaper, you can't really tell with this, that might have been on there before, this is used paper. But if the sandpaper is not all balling up with what looks like chewing gum, it's ready to sand. And usually the other test is if it's powdery. Now if this wasn't powdery, or if this was being difficult to sand, the answer would be just let it go till, give it another day, and if you have a warm radiator, now we already have the heat on in the house, if you have a warm radiator, put it there, the heat will help kick it off. But even at roughly, not even 12 hours, this is already powdering off, and it can be sanded. So what I'll do is I'll get one side, get the other side, and we'll actually be ready to start putting some dope on this wing very soon. As soon as that glass is sanded out. One of the things at this point I have to consider is, because I have all the B25 videos, I want to go back and make sure I haven't left out a step, because we haven't even started the body yet. And the reason is, once this is sanded out, I put dope and tissue on it, and I may get that in the next couple, may even get that before I go on vacation. But the problem is the sequence of things. Now, if I were to build an nacelles next, before this is tissued, the tissue wouldn't be going underneath, and I want where the nacelles and where the body attaches, I want that to be on a relatively hard surface, and the tissue, the glass, any of that hardens up the wood. So having the sequence down of how I'm going to do this, I'm going to just try to, in a lot of ways, just replicate what I did with the B25, and every once in a while, if I forget the sequence, I'll pop in the appropriate video that just shows what came first, the horse, the cart, or the cowling, or the whatever, or the bird. But the sequencing of things, Keith Ferguson told me one time one of the things he got off the video that was significant, and I never gave it much thought, was the sequence of how things went together. And I guess a lot of people don't have a real clear view of, they can't build it, what I call it, I build a plane in my mind, I picture, well, that there's so many things, like I would not want to make the flaps now. I don't want to put the hinge pockets in because I don't know where the hinge pockets are. I can't put the bulkhead on that holds the wing, the two bulkheads, because I don't have the body. I can't really make the nacelles because I want the tissue going under the nacelles. So in essence, I've eliminated things and came to the conclusion that the next step is going to be to absolute final sand this wing out, and that'll probably take the better part of a day. Get a couple of coats of dope and tissue on it, and then I'm going to work to finish up the silver before I even start the nacelles. This glass sanded out, just unbelievable. That is one of the nicest glass jobs I've done, but again, like I said, every time you do one, it seems to get better and better automatically. Now, what I want to do, I want to make a little ellipse part. I have a template for that supports the bell crank, and put a little cap on it, so even though this is glued in temporarily, I really want to spread this load out over a wider footprint. And I wouldn't, if this wasn't a take-apart plane, I'd take care of this once the wing was glued in the body, putting a former there, I'll put a former this way. But because it's a take-apart, I have to allow for that, at least the side that goes to the top. Ellipse template that I've used over and over again, in fact part of it's missing, and a piece of scrap 1/8" light ply, but I want to have the grain going span-wise. See, there's 2 or 3 grains will go span-wise. I wouldn't want to put it this way, so I want to get the ellipses the long way. And this really spreads the load out over a much wider area. And needless to say, got to do the same thing on the bottom. We're actually ready to put the first coat of clear dope on this. This is final sanded out. And what I want to do, I want to mix a quart of clear and a quart of thinner. I want to put 50-50 and 3 to 5 coats depending on how this wood absorbs the dope. 3 would be the minimum, 5 the max. Maybe sanded once in between coats, around the 3rd or 4th coat. A light sanding just to break the fuzz. Now, it would be nice if we had this beautiful table with everything all nice and clean and neat and everything, but my shop, we paint virtually every day. We even paint the saw. And this is a real workshop. This is not a, make it pretty and make everybody be impressed when they see it. We work and we paint all the time. We have 9 spray guns. Each one has a different color, or clear, or PVA, or whatever. An excellent idea to try to keep 1 gun for clear, 1 gun for filler, 1 gun for white, etc., etc., according to how many guns you can afford to have. And never take the color out. Now, once I have this batch mixed, it's kind of clammy out there. I may need 10% retarder. Looks like it's going to rain. Clammy day. I'm going to go paint out in the garage. I'll do this off camera because basically we're trying to keep Karen healthy. And any odors, any chemicals we can avoid is really a big help. Now, I think this just sanded out as nice as I've ever sanded it out. And at this point, we're just under 3 ounces lighter than on the B25 wing. The reason is we used a different glassing pattern, and I think the wood was a little better. And we did a lot more sanding. This I sanded the better part of a day on this. Block sanded it, got the leading edge exactly how I wanted it, worked on the tip box. So I think we have a good head start on having that A26 that'll be significantly lighter than the B25. I'll get this painted off camera. It is miserable outside. 3 to 5 coats, an hour between coats, 2 hours depending on when it dries. When you rub it and touch it, if it's dry to the touch, give it another half hour and put the next coat on. If the woodwork were rough, I'd want to sand between every coat, but it's not really rough. And then before I tissue it, we'll sand the whole thing out with 400, of course. What have you made now? You've got all the ready to install on the wing?
One's there. This is the third one. Here's the first.
These are
All I
Wes's
need to
gear
do is
blocks?
epoxy. All I need to do is epoxy. This is the heaviest one.
Okay,
And this is the one that'll probably take the most stress.
okay.
So,
And you made a pattern for all these, obviously, so that
Yeah, well,
you can
basically-
replicate it?
basically, it all comes from, here's the, can't see it against,
Yeah, you need a dark, yeah.
okay, basically, here's a center line. Okay, here's your spar. This is the X and Y axis. Here's your 12-degree offset. And what you do is you just lay the template on top and extend the lines through, and you come up with a pattern for what you need to do. You know, like this, okay? Line up the center lines. You notice, well, if I make the adjustment here, center line of the wing is where the lead outs will go through, and here's your cutout for the blocks.
Right.
So you just take every blank you ever need and lay it down on top of that, and presto, you got your,
And you've got your 12-degree angle?
you got the 12-degree angle, you got all 9 yards. And it's all based on the back end of the riblet, which would be the spar, and the center line of the rib. The outboards.
Wes has really made a nice little set of templates for this too, which we're going to see once we get them in the wing.
Yeah. The thing that I like about this, Windy, as opposed to a piece of 1/8 light ply, much more strength in this than the light ply, especially with the basswood inserts in there.
Oh, for
You
sure.
know, in the critical
Yeah,
areas.
not even close.
And the other nice part about it is you get enough surface here
You've got enough-
to bond this,
right.
when the skin goes on.
You're not going to have a bulge in the skin or
Right,
sand
right.
through. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's nice because you got 32nd on each side, and
Yeah.
then balsa wood in the middle.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a nice way to do it.
So we'll see how it works out.
Well, all the dope is dry, and you know what I'm going to do while you're doing that? I got my my little project. I need to make another elevator, and I'll do that off camera. And that's about, well, hey, if we get some of these gear blocks installed, what I'm doing is in between coats of dope, we're working on other projects. So
I would like,
this one is rather labor intensive, but once it's done, it'll really be something. I think it'll be really neat. Les was finishing up his gear blocks. I wound up getting the other elevator made. I'm going to do the same thing with these. Hollow the tips, split them, hollow them. That real nice V-shaped leading edge on there. And we also got 3 coats of dope on the wing. It's outside drying, so I guess this was pretty productive day. Magic of video, we turn this block into these 2 little hollowed pieces, hollowed out. We are really pushing this to make sure this is light. Now the only problem is, Les and I have been having a contest all afternoon, so you can make the lightest part. Except he's cheating. So how much did all this stuff weigh? 21?
21.5.
Okay, so that's doable.
This would be the outboard set, this being the inner, that being the outer, and then this is the inboard set, this being the inner, and this being the outer that takes the block. So by the
So
time,
you just have to make the blocks up now, and that's the blocks. So
the blocks are going to be made out of
bingo.
3/32 plywood running this way, the long way. and a layer of 64th on the top and a layer of 64th on the bottom with the grain running in the opposite direction. But the 332nd is going to have 2 holes in it.
Now, what are you going to do next? You're going to put these in the core. The next thing?
Well, I want to make up the bottom blocks first. While they're out, I can fit.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that.
And then go from there.
I'm thinking tail feathers. Tail feathers, not
Well,
blocks.
this goes, the next thing that happens is these go in the wing and I sheet the wing.
Chicky, get off of us. Look at this bird pain in the ass, right? I was happy today, we got a phone call from Kenny Stevens, and he flies electric RC and has an electric boat, so he's agreed to help us try to resolve all our issues that we want to try to develop this, over the winter, develop this electric stunner with Mike Palco and Bob Zambelli and everybody else that's all of a sudden been excited about this. Walt Brownell. Now Les just came up with a real nice way of cutting. Now he had to widen the gear blocks for these
Slots, yeah.
trick gear blocks, and I was thinking a Zonosaur might do it, but look how nice that worked out. And what'd you wind up doing?
All it was a number 11 blade and a metal straight edge. After I marked it out
flexible
fairly
straight edge.
accurately, I mean, you get a great sharp cut.
That's a good little tip.
The trick here, though, was to remove from in here the additional foam that was glued against the spar. But it's done.
Yeah, you don't want to be gluing a foam. You want a wood-to-wood joint there.
You know,
And we just basically have one elevator left. One done.
A little sandpaper.
I'd say this was a pretty productive day. I'm very impressed. Very impressed with these gear blocks. I just can't wait to see you bounce a landing and say, oh, it's those gear blocks are now.
And if I let you fly, you're going to do it deliberately, right? You're going to come in and do a Chinese three-pointer.
Well, we're going to put this to the test. It's either going to be a rough landing or land on a rudder over concrete. No, I think that's going to be a cool system. Actually, even if it, from here it looks really cool.
Well, using this tube, the aluminum tube as the pilot,
Yeah, when you get
for
the
that
little
block
blocks.
over the top, we'll go in there and it'll be no problem to cut that out, put the block in and build the... Yeah, I'm pleased with that. So far, so good. Needs a little, the slots need a little dressing up at the back end, and then we can epoxy those clips in. All right.
Well, so far on our 826 wing, this is what we have done. And I wanted to list up a couple of the tips that I think will make making any dope finish a lot easier. The woodwork on this wing especially is extremely good. I mean, it is as flat, smooth, there aren't many defects in it. On that raw wood, I have already put and brushed on in a cold day. Now, on a very cold day, in fact, we didn't even want to work outside the other day. It was so cold. I brushed on 5 coats. I put on 3 coats, and then lightly sanded with 320. And I mean lightly, just take the fuzz off. Then put 2 coats on, and today I'm going to sand with 400. Now, what I'm trying to do is make a base. Now, here's what's wrong with, well, if you have this understanding of what's happening, you can do this in 2 steps. Now, we're ready for tissue, but here's what has to happen before you put any tissue on. If your woodwork is like this, now let's exaggerate it, and you put your 5 coats on, or 3 coats, some amount. Between 3 and 5 is what I think is correct. What happens, soon as you go to sand, you're going to knock the high spots down and there'll be a hole in the tissue. You knock the high spots down. Now, there'll always be little spots, no matter how good you have it, in the very beginning, because each time you sand it, you're knocking down little high spots. But if the woodwork is terrible here, what happens is now you wind up in here with 30 coats of dope before this fills in and gets level, or in the worst of all world, your finish looks like this. When you're finished, you can see the high spots. So what I'm suggesting is, if you really commit to having a really, really nice finish, the place to spend extra time is right in the woodwork. Now, I've even seen Les, who's a little bit fussier of a finisher than I am. In fact, he's a lot more fussy. At times, block sand out the whole wood with 600. Well, I haven't done that, and I'm not that fanatical. But what that might buy you, I'm just thinking, is you might then only need 4 coats of dope. I don't know. But I know on this A26 wing, the woodwork is really way above even my, what I make the standard for myself. So you have all these choices, but the ultimate thing that you're trying to do is get a flat surface with a given amount of dope on it. And with no spots, no raw wood spots coming through. Now on this last sand out, just before I put the tissue on, I want to have this as flat as possible. So what I'll probably do is spend the better part of today really getting this dressed off. Because once I get the tissue on, I want the tissue to act like a glove. I don't want to have spots. I don't want to have high spots where it's coming through. Making a base. Once you have that base, now the rest of the finish, just you save time within time. It just goes quickly. When the base is like this, every coat of dope that you're sanding out is a nightmare. Every coat is more work and more effort, and you're going through and patching. And so what I'm really suggesting is, and I'll do it today because today is going to be, it's definitely too cold to do anything outside, so I will spend this time in the shop, get this base absolutely finalized, and get it ready for the tissue, and then hopefully, we'll see how long it takes, maybe even get the tissue on today. Very, very important that the wood underneath the tissue is as smooth and error-free, flaw-free as it possibly can be. And if you understand this, what happens is then you really understand the essence of a lightweight finish. Now, no matter how you do it, one of the things is to have a really nice finish. It's always going to be a certain thickness, and that could be determined by the level of finish that you want. If you want a front row finish, a second row, a concourse winner, whatever, it's still going to be a certain amount of coats of dope or a certain thickness and a certain weight. This, in other words, once you make this thinner and thinner, well, you've defeated the whole purpose, because now it's a finish that probably won't last long. Halfway through the season, you'll see spots coming up or whatever. There's a given amount that this finish should be, and it's very predictable and very easy to achieve if the base is right. What's wrong is when you make a finish that, and we'll just go back to a bad analogy. Now here's what happens. One of two things. You have this finish on, and let's say you're willing to deal with the fact that you don't mind that it looks ripply. Well, that's really not as good as that in my book, especially on a semi-scale plane where the appearance of the plane is a major, it's the reason we build a plane. Well, here's what happens to most people that wind up putting on a 10 or a 12 ounce finish. They wind up paying the price for not sanding out the base by having parts of the finish here that are 2 and 3 times the amount of weight and thickness. And then in the worst of all worlds, as you buff this down, you see spots come through. We've all seen that. And unless you put on way too much clear, you're almost guaranteed, if you have bad woodwork, this is going to come through. And I can't say over and over enough just how important it is to get this part right. How important it is not to get sick in the middle of the winter. This is what I call a decoupage finish. It may look real nice up here, but you've got 4, 5, 6 ounces of extra material that's going along for the ride, and you ultimately, when you buff and the finish starts to wear, your high spots are going to come through. So the other thing, and this would happen by the tip weight box, and we're real conscious of this, anywhere there's an outside corner or an edge of a flap, let's just make an edge of something. Now what happens, you put on this amount of finish. What's going to be the first thing happens when you start buffing or using the plane? You're going to see this corner wear out. This corner is going to wear out. So what we do is every single time we do a sand out, we radius corners. Radius around every corner, every edge. And what that does, it gives you a lot better chance of not buffing through. When you have a razor blade edge, and anytime you want to prove this to yourself, let's make it real obvious. You have a razor blade edge. Go take a coat of dope, paint it on the edge of the razor, and just touch it with anything, rubbing that edge is going to come right through. Now if you have a radius edge, do the same amount of dope. Well, wow, takes a lot longer. Now make that radius the radius of a pen. You'll never wear it off. So the thing to avoid on a finish is razor edges around the edges of cowls, edges of tip weight boxes, edges of rudders, flaps. You want to avoid razor edges. Now a lot of this stuff sounds redundant and sounds like, well, that's basic, simple stuff. It is. The essence of a good finish is very easy. It's like good brickwork. It's just getting this brick to line up with this brick to line up with this. And what happens at the end, you have a beautiful brick wall. Get one brick in crooked, and all of a sudden you've got, something that isn't quite as nice. And we are striving for, in the case of the A26, we want to make it better than the B25. B25 is already a concourse winner, but I want one that's even better. I always want that bar to be going up. And I'm willing to pay the time right now, even if it takes all day. If it takes 2 days, it won't matter, because the end result is going to be this thin glove of a finish that's beautiful, doesn't show ripples, and won't wear out. Good information. I hope that gets you started on. If you're building we're building, it's the middle. It's past the beginning of the building season, and we're in high gear here. But we want to be building, and I just don't want to be building one plane after another where they're the same as the one before. I'd like each one to get better and better and better. What I'm talking about as far as the finish goes. This plane has already got lots and lots of flights on it, and there aren't spots all over the place where the paint is coming through. And we haven't done it basically by putting on 6 extra gallons of clear. We did it by doing an incredible lot of sanding early on in the program. You're doing a rib wing, a geo wing, an I-beam wing, radiusing around all the cap strips before you do the finish. So important, and that all that time that was spent, even on the Typhoon, all that time that was spent, you notice no places is it buffed through. And this plane has a lot of flights on it. It's a top 5 plane, it's had a lot of flights, it's a front row plane, whatever, however you want to define it. It's a quality job. All of the edges around the cowl are nice and radiused. You don't see any big chunks of paint falling off. Now that's not true of Miss Ashley. We refinished the bottom of it, and for a lot of reasons, most of them dealing with raw fuel getting on the paint early on, the edges didn't last, and I had to repaint the whole cowl. So you want to try to make it that as much of the time as you can spend on the actual base coat of a finish, and as little on the very end. At the very end, you just want to have it as smooth as possible. Every minute you spend early on in this, picture building a house. If you get the foundation straight, building the rest of the house is easy. If the foundation's crooked, the carpenter has to make adjustments, the roofer, the window guy. If you get that base straight, that's the best investment that I've ever seen in all of modeling. Is just get the base coat nice and straight. Get the ribs all radiused. Back down to the shop. Karen was going to get me a new bed pad today, but she didn't. We forgot. So what I'm going to basically do here is pad the table with a bunch of towels and blankets and that little piece that I have. But I want to take the wing, and I want to spend the better part of the day, or as long as it takes, getting that base ready for the tissue job. And if I can get the tissue on, then that tissue will be laying flat. there's no way that base of that finish, from that point up, it'll be as easy as pie to get a nice finish on there. If I'm going to have to deal with this, that base of the finish, I'm going to pay, if I'm cheap today, I'm going to pay for the rest of the time that I do the finish on this plane. Now also, just to mention it, every plane I've ever done in the last, oh my God, since 90, I guess, I always bring the wing and the tail up to silver. In this case, because we're building A26, the sequence of building is a little different, but building the wing up to silver, it's a lot easier to do all this finish now. Picture this. Now, I didn't set this up, but this is a good example. How easy it is to sand that whole thing out, and how difficult it would be to get in between there and in between there. And I mean, just having the fact that it's a take-apart plane makes it a lot easier, and having the fact that we haven't put the nacelles on yet, much easier to get a nice finish. It also allows me to have the tissue go right through the span to span, more or less, with an overlap in the middle. But and same with the tail. If the tail unbolts, and these planes all take-apart planes, the advantage is I can get the tissue on here to double overlap in the middle. Working on that tail off the plane is, you can put it in your lap, watch a baseball game, whatever. But once the plane is all together, then it's really difficult. Even the buffing operations get very difficult. So if you use the technique of bringing a wing and tail, if a plane that's in one piece, like Rich Jacobone's plane that we've just seen, you bring the wing and the tail up to silver, then you only have to deal with the body. But just think of that word, the base, the foundation. If you get that right, you have just saved yourself many times that amount of time that it took to get it right, many times in the final finish. I'm going to try Les's method here with this is the last time we're going to sand this before we tissue it. We're doing it with 600. But again, just a quick reminder, it's these edges that the paint is going to wear out on. And if you're real careful and you maintain a radius each time you sand it, you will not have a problem, or you'll minimize the problem. No razor edges. Now, what I want to do is, since this has been drying overnight, I just want to scuff it. I want to get off all the fuzz. It's already been sanded enough times. I just want to get that minimum amount of material, and I want that feel, and I want to see when I candle it, just the slightest hint that there's dope on there. I don't want any raw wood spots if possible. Now, the same is going to be true. This is the center where the wing has already been glassed. And I'm not doing a lot of sanding. I'm trying not to remove anything but fuzz. And every time you do this, it just gets less and less work to do the next layer down, because each one is flat instead of having high spots. Now see, I've done that. When I'm done with the whole wing, ooh, that feels nice. That whole wing will be ready for tissue. At this point in time is pay me now or pay me later, and to be honest, I'd rather pay right now. After I have this whole thing sanded, another important step, get all the dust off. Get the dust off the table. Everything is the purpose of it is to get the tissue to lay down flat. I put quite a bit of time into getting this as nice as I could course, we'll find out in the final result. You can put all the time you want in, but if the result isn't what you want, then it's kind of hopeless. But what I'm going to do, I guess I'll do this wing panel first. Cut the tissue ahead of time. It's medium weight tissue. Get the dope ready. I use the method of using Windex. If you want to slow down the Windex drying, mix up a thing of Windex that's half, oh, I don't have one here. Half Windex and half water. In this temperature, the Windex will be fine for making the tissue damp. And then what I do, try to get my shirt vacuumed off too, is I press the tissue down with my bare hand so that the dope that's underneath it, the dope tends to come up through the tissue at the end of it. Out of all the wings I've done, and especially these latest couple, I think this one is really going to be nice. So I'm really, really interested in getting this right. And I'm not working on a time window. I don't have to get this ready for the Christmas show or something. I'm just working as if time didn't exist and to get this as nice as possible. That is really, at this point in time, I'm really going to be able to buy myself hours and hours saved where parts are coming through and sanding errors and everything. If I get this tissue to lay down really flat. Because this wing is 70-inch span, what happens is the tissue is not going to go over the center double like I want. So what I'm going to make the decision to do here is let the tissue go over the center and do the tips as a separate piece. Because I really want to have the double tissue in the center. Let me take one piece off. And the choices would be, or else I could just put an extra piece of tissue in the middle. Don't like that. I like having it overlap at least an inch. At least I can do the whole tip, so I can lay this out in such a way where the joint of the wing is, where the two foam pieces come together. I want to have one piece of tissue go over this way, one piece the other way. So in the middle, there's double tissue. And it won't be a big deal to do the tip separately. I like to start with a small piece, just to get the feel for how this is going to go relative to the temperature. Shop temperature is cold this morning. In fact, this is the first morning I thought there might be snow outside. Same dope that I use, it's 50-50. Now just some of the little things that'll help. Really get a good coat on. Don't play. Don't try to save dope at this point in time. You've got to get a coat of dope on there. The wet tissue it's damp now, it's not wet. If you spray it over a towel, the towel will take the extra off, which is what has obviously happened here. Lay the tissue right on top, stretch it down, press it down with your bare hands. There's nothing, I haven't found anything better, and I don't like to wear rubber gloves when I do this. I think it works better with bare hands. Now I'm pushing the dope up through the tissue. And if you don't think the tissue adds strength to a part, just make an I-beam wing someday. Make an Aries or any I-beam design, I-beam Spitfire, and then go, after the wing is tissued and the dope shrinks, you get the strength from this by the fact that the dope is shrinking. It's why this material is stronger, in my opinion, than carbon matte. Because carbon matte doesn't shrink. Whatever you put it on, that's what it stays. We have that ongoing debate all the time. And I've never seen anybody win the carbon matte debate. If you do one part with tissue and dope and one with carbon matte, well, the carbon matte isn't going to shrink, unfortunately. Just put make two equal parts someday and do the test. I always like to do the test myself anyway. This is just to get me ready. Now, before we do anything, is flood the part with dope. It's flooded, because this is the part that's going to be a real problem if when you go to put tape on a plane, or we start doing all our fancy stars and bars and ink lines and everything, if this delaminates and pulls up, this is the place it's going to pull up. So I'm just going to spend a couple minutes rubbing that right down with my bare hands until I see what. There's no chance that I don't have that saturated and a good bond underneath. And that's what the texture should look like when that part is ready. So the first step here, we're going to do one panel on tape because this is the part. Couple little tips. You don't want the tissue to be soaking wet, dripping. That's why I spray it over a towel. The towel will just let that evaporate for a minute or so. Don't want it soaking wet. But what I do want is I want the dope that's on the wing, and I want a real coat of dope on the wing. I don't want what I call a play coat where we're fooling around. And how many times I've seen people, good friends that have built a plane, and you pull the tape up, and right at this joint where the tissue joins the wing is where it's a problem. It's a good idea. I know people they never really realize it until they do the test. If you double tissue the middle of the wing, let that overlap, how much strength that adds. Even though we've got it glassed and ellipse and everything, any strength we can build in the middle of that wing will be just fine. Again, don't want to fool around right now. Putting on a minimum amount of dope here and trying to convince yourself that that's a weight saving, that's really not going to do you much good. I heard an awful thing from Rich Peabody yesterday that they had a fire out at Brodax. And the room where all the dope was caught fire, and now he's building another building. So, John, our hearts are out to you, boy, with the flood and with that, I don't know. Now again, we want to position this, and just like a bed sheet. We have to make a cut for where that little belt crank support is. It's unfortunate they don't make this tissue 2 inches longer, but you don't really see the joints in this anyway, so I don't know what I'm worried about. Now it's nice if you can get some or all of the wrinkles out, but even if you can't get them all out, it's not a big deal because they sand right out anyway. Now if you're working in really hot weather, warm weather, it may be to your advantage to put in a little bit of retarder just to slow the dope drying down. You can do that, of course. Retarder slows the dope down. But even wrinkles that don't come out sand right out, so I don't get too crazy. I gotta cut this little spot here out. Now the part that really matters, and I can't emphasize enough, get dope on at this stage. You don't want anything dry. Okay, that's laid down about as good as we can expect. Now the advantage of using Windex is it dries quickly. Water, if you do this, might have a tendency to wrinkle the foam, the wing on a foam wing. It might be a problem. The alternative is half water and half Windex, which is a compromise, but in my case, for these shop conditions, Windex seems to be the answer. Windex and rubbing it by hand. It's that operation of pushing it down. Now, a couple years back, we used those little sponges that Karen had kind of improvised. That seemed to work okay, but unfortunately we don't have any of them now. She's been doing so many craft projects. Now that we're in the craft business. I notice I've done the bottom first, because if I'm going to have a problem, let it be on the bottom. If I'm going to have one panel that isn't exactly right, I'd rather it be the bottom than the top anyway. And I'm kind of working fast. You can do yourself a favor, just get a little bit bigger than normal brush if you think you're going to run out of time. The big brush is an advantage. I think this is 1.5 inches, Ron. That's an inch. I got plenty over the center of the wing here, so I'm happy about that. Now the trick is, this is the part that a lot of people think is unnecessary, but I'm not going to change my way of doing this because I've not had a problem with paint peeling up since I've been doing this. And you can feel any place there might even be a wrinkle you can't even see. Now, just as a warning, you don't want to put more than about 10% retarder in to slow the dope down. Simple reason that on a foam wing, you don't want it going down into the wood at this point and possibly letting the glue pop off, especially if it's epoxy. Now it's simply a thing of, where's my razor? Trimming off the edges. What I like to do is, as soon as possible, as soon as this is dry to the touch, which is about 5 minutes, I want to flip it over and do the other panel. I don't want to have one. See, like right now, I wouldn't want to go to lunch or something. I'd like to get all of them wet and let them all dry at the same time, if possible. Again, everything is preceded by the saying of if possible. Once I trim off the edges, then I can wrap music. I can wrap the edge. And if there's any little spot I miss, I can just put a little patch on it without any problem at all. Save all these little scraps in case I need a little patch. Now, before we even go any further, I'm going to get another coat of dope right on this. I'm not going to fool around. Now maybe in hot weather you'd really have to go, but in our shop conditions and the way this is at a 50-50 mix, this seems to be really about the right ratio, I guess is the right word. Then you can figure out that if you do the other 3 panels, they're going to be exactly the same as this is. No point boring you on video, but I know a lot of people can pick up 1 or 2 little tips. That little tip of vacuuming things up. You'd be amazed how many people come down a shop and they want to work on something. They don't vacuum anything up. In fact, Les wanted to get an industrial shop vac at one time with a brush attachment, so just so he could keep dust out of his work. I thought that was a good idea, but since we have this house vac, boy, that is the trick of tricks. Because we have pushed that right down. I don't see any way that cannot bond the way we want it to. And we're just going to do the other 3 off camera. Whenever I work in here, and doing dope, of course, because I try to keep the smell out, I try to work as early in the morning as possible, as quickly as possible. They got a big fan that blows the fumes out, but even at that, Still something I have to deal with, and I always let the parts dry outside. Anyway, there's another reason for letting stuff dry outside. It's a good reason too. In cold weather like this, and believe me, we're down around 35, 40 degrees here. This is what's going to happen. This will take extra long to dry, and it'll lay down, and by drying slow like that, there's no chance we're going to have any orange peel when we actually go to sand this out. Tomorrow, the next day, whenever, it sands out a lot nicer, in my opinion, when it dries. When it dries cool. When it dries in hot weather, it seems to skim off and get chewing gummy for a day or so. But if the trick always is, if you can, let it dry a couple extra days. If you're not in a rush, we're just going to put this out here for the next couple of days, let this dry. We got plenty of other projects to work on. I got a little bit of time left tonight while all our dope is drying, and I like to organize these jobs if possible. While dope is drying, I can carve and hollow this tip out, and maybe even start setting up the hinges in the horn for this part. Again, having two jobs going at the same time, dope is always drying. If you were only doing one thing and dope is drying and you have no other project to work on, well, I think ultimately you get less done that way. Anyway, we'll do this, since we've already done one like that, we'll do this off camera, and then we'll come back to it when we're ready to do the horn and the hinges. Long ago when we didn't have anything but a drawing, and from this drawing we've been able to make what I think is going to be a relatively nice tail. It's exactly to print. We have a template for each and every part. One of the things I always like to do is get the hinges in as soon as possible. I want to get the hinges in because then that's going to set this. I can get a final set on this and then figure out what we're going to do about mounting the horn, lucky boxes, fancy horns, tricky horns, or whatever. That's the next step in this whole, well, it's evolving. I guess what would make sense is to get the hinge pockets in. And I know because I have a piece in the trailing edge and a piece in here, so I just need to copy right off the drawing exactly where the hinges are going to go. I can just really put little dots on here so I know roughly where the hinge pockets are going to go. And I have my hinge pocket tool. And we definitely are going to be really running short on hinges here. I don't think we're going to have enough for this whole project. But I do have some, and I just need a couple of dummy hinges here to start this off. And I need my hinge pocket tool for IMs, little hinge pocket tool. Maybe we'll put a fresh piece of sandpaper on there. I really love these IM hinges, but you can see I don't think we're going to have enough. So I guess we're going to have to go with whatever we can use here. And maybe there's enough. I'm glad I never throw any hinges away, even these ones that need a little work with the pin. The first hinge pocket here, I realized since we're not going to have a wire with take-apart hinges on this plane, we're going to glue the hinges in. We're not going to have the option of replacing the elevators. And again, that's basically to save a weight. That's a little bit of a weight saving. But by just going in here, what happens is, now the way this is made and that little block of wood that's in there, it actually acts as a center line. So it'll be real easy to get the hinge pockets in. Real easy to get them centered because it's like an automatic center line. And each one of these tools I have for a different size hinge, it's just got some sandpaper on it, and you can measure the thickness according to what hinge, the body of the hinge that you're going to use, and then basically lay out with the little dots. Just wait till the plywood bottoms out and you've got a hinge pocket. And you can make them as tight or as sloppy as you like. Just trying to slot this out because there's... There we go. What I want to have is just a press fit. I don't want to have it sloppy, and I don't want to have it that when I press the hinge in, this puffs up. I can feel I don't have any strain on there, just a nice step is going to be to get a center line on this and just transpose over our hinge little pockets, little slots, so that the hinges will slide in both sides equally. I'm going to transpose these marks. I marked which was the inner and which was the outer. A real look at, I need to do a little trimming off here. Let's get a look at how this is going to look. And next time we do a session, we're going to have a little chance to figure out exactly how we want to have the horn and or lucky boxes and or whatever we're going to have. A little quick tip that seemed to help a lot while I was trying to get the tips to blend in nice and even was just putting some tape on both sides, just as a temporary way that I can dress off one block into the other. Now on a flat tail, it's really a little bit thicker in the front than in the back, so that tip needs a little bit of a curve in it. But I think that looks about as close to scale as I can possibly get it for working off of this drawing. And again, we're not building a scale model, so we have a lot of leeway in this that we can look at it from a lot of different angles, check it out, look at the plans, look at the book, look at that black plastic model we have. I think it's going to be fine. And it really, this came out as straight as I've ever made a tail, and it's light, much lighter than the B25 tail. Now I guess we'll spend the rest of this evening just getting some more coats of clear on that wing out in the garage. Boy, this came out better than I thought it would, and it is lighter. Oh, just while I have time tonight, I'll think about how I want to do those linkages. Lucky boxes, horn linkages, it's going to need a custom horn, it looks like. Whatever. Anyway, this part, the woodwork, the glasswork, everything on this is just really really nice. Sounds like I'm bragging. I am. Now this morning, this is one of the things I wait. Every time I get to this point in the finish, it gets kind of exciting. There's a couple of reasons. Number one, this has been drying a couple of days. And because we have the heat on, I've had it up in the attic by a heating vent where the most heat can go through it. And it has just dried up. When I've looked at this, oh man, it's not often I really get this excited about a wing. This wing I think is going to be the heart and soul of a really special plane somewhere in the next year or two. But the point is, here's the things that to look for. If you can let it dry an extra hour, that'll be a big help. We've got 5 coats of clear dope over the tissue now, and each one maybe 6 hours apart, 3 hours, I don't know. There's 5 coats on there. Now we want to really block sand this tissue down, and I want to do it carefully. I want to do it with 320 or 400, depending on how smooth it is. The objective is not to go through the tissue at any spot. And to do this real carefully, it just takes time. This is just a time-consuming thing. That's why I like to set aside a day when I have plenty of time. Hopefully the phone won't be ringing off the hook. Because at this point in time, that base finish that we talked about, when we're done sanding this out, we're going to be ready for filler. And that base, if it's dead flat, is going to give us the lightest and the nicest finish all at the same time. And what makes me excited about this is because we've already got the weight, we're actually under the weight we're looking for. I didn't know if when we made this plane, if we're going to be able to even duplicate what we have with the B-25, let alone make it lighter. Well, it looks like we are going to be able to make it lighter, hopefully. But when you have that base on, now from this point on, everything is easy. Everything is going to, the filler is going to stand right out. Any other paint, ink lines, we've just bought ourselves hours and hours and hours of frustration as you're sanding and, you just went through a spot, a high spot. Or if you're doing an open bay wing, that you have all the cap strips radiused, everything radiused, and all like on the I-beam, to get primer on them so they're nice and smooth. Ooh, that just looks so nice. Anyway, the sand out now, very time consuming, very delicate, but this I find very enjoyable because I just find that this is where it really starts to really feel nice. When you touch it, it doesn't have that rough feel, it has that really smooth feel. Here where we have double tissue joints, what I like to do is do all the double tissue joints first. Again, every minute that we spend right now is going to save hours later on in the fact that we hopefully will not have a lot of touch-ups. Now after that much sanding, and you can see it's powdering right off, even if you do this the next day, but when you give it an extra day, I can't even feel where the tissue joint is. It's for all purposes buried, but when we put the coat of silver on this, it'll be silver filler next. Boy, that's going to be nice. And it really is a rewarding thing. Once you know you can do nice finishing, it opens up the door to just having the models of your dreams, whether that be semi-scale or Noblers or nostalgia planes or electrics or whatever. And once you see powder coming off, you can see the powder on my hand. Once it's powdering off, now the other thing is we don't want to go through. I don't want to go through and tear the tissue. If I do, I'll have to make a little patch. I want to go just enough sanding that I have it. I've got 5 coats of clear. There's plenty of clear. I shouldn't be going through. I want it to be as perfectly flat as possible. I want that mirror-like diamond look as it reflects in the sun. I want to carefully sand all the edges. When I put the clear on, I always put a couple extra coats of clear on edges. All these edges here have to get radiused. Where the double tissue joint is in the center of the wing. And boy, that center is just this, with the glass, just beautiful. This is how I check to see if I have any bad spots too, with my bare hand. I just like, your eye, especially in wood grain, can be fooled. You'll think everything's beautiful, you paint this silver and there'll be a ripple or something. But your hand doesn't lie. And when you're doing the airfoil section, if you can manage to do this a good percentage of the time, any little high spot will just disappear. Again, around the leading edge, I'm really excited about this. You know, there's a lot of things I do that, well, yeah, they're nice, and yeah, they'll be in the front row and everything, but this one really excites me for whatever reason. As I'm working on this, I have my inspiration photos hanging all over the shop, but I just keep picturing this once this wing is done and it has the final finish on it. I'll look back at today, all the hours that I'm putting in it today. It won't even matter because it'll be done. And it'll be done to the best of my ability. Like a lot of things in life, most of this is just time. If you're willing to spend the time, you'll wind up with some pretty special stuff somewhere down the road. And when you take shortcuts, well, you usually get shortcuts. Now with that wing all final sanded out, it's not a good day to be spraying filler, but the next coat on that is going to be a coat of filler. And what we do to make the filler, we take silver dope, put a little bit of talc in it, and spray it. We're not going to really do that today because first off, it's raining, and I don't like to do any of this spraying if I possibly can. On a humid day, I'm just trapping moisture, so we're just going to wait for a nice sunny day. And again, we're not working toward any timetable. I remember many days when I did the B-25 where I just waited and waited and waited, but you look at the final finish on this plane and there's no cloudiness, there's nothing that disappointed me. And as I'm looking at, we're coming up on the end of this tape, we have the tail ready to go. I need to make up a horn in the next couple days. Get a horn in there, get my arrangement for the lucky boxes, or however I'm going to deal with that dihedral in the horn, and I'll think about that. But we have made, and I don't think I've left any of the little tricks and tips off of the video. We've made a wing that, I think this wing, you've certainly seen the video of how well this plane flies, and here we have one that's just under 3 ounces lighter at this stage when it's ready for filler. I just have a real good feeling about this. And when you have a good feeling, you tend to work even harder and longer and more intensely. And we've certainly had enough inspirational stuff to look at. This is about as excited as I've ever been about building a model. And I think part of it is that Les is a real intense guy and we enjoy doing the same things. And we have plenty of videos to watch, plenty of people calling us that have made us want to push the envelope a little bit. It was quite a job sanding out that Spitfire wing. And when I did it, I clearly remember how many hours I put into that I-beam wing with all those ribs. But every time I go up to the Spitfire bedroom and look at it, I just think, well, was it worth it? Of course it is. A lot of things that people seem to have a problem with, or that they think, I think in my case, they think differently than me. They see a thing and they see a problem, or that it's a labor of love or a lot of work, and they never see the reward. Well, when we got this little bird, I always keep this picture right in my shop just to get an idea of. When we found him laying along the roadside, I had no idea how my life would change and how much work he would be. He's like putting a finish on a B-25, but boy is he fun to have. Every minute I have with him is just a special minute to me. And if you're going to count yourself wealthy in life or lucky, I guess having a pet like Chickadoodle is part of it. Now, it's not going to be long, and we're going to have Freddie back here. It's a long story, and we won't deal with it in this video, but when I have the two birds here in the shop at the same time, we get some exciting moments. Exciting moments in a world of stunt. Anyway, I hope you'll share the video. We got about a minute left here. Hope you really have enjoyed and can pick up some good information, or maybe just some things that make the sport of model aviation a little more fun. Be getting a supply of wheels in the next week or so. We're going to try to make up some more of these semi-scale wheels. I'm really thinking they'll dress up the B-25 and be an asset for the A-26. This wheel right here, 4 grams. And special thanks to Big Jim Greenaway, who basically the thing that we do with the fiberglassing was his innovation, and he was willing to share it with everyone years ago, and it's been a very important reason why a lot of these planes have just been getting better and better and better. One of the geniuses of our time, Big Jim Greenaway. Anyway, thanks for joining us, and again, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please pass them around, share them with your friends. Let's keep this sport alive, growing, and in every way the most fun it can be. We'll see you on the next tape.